Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Theory Crafting Fixes for weak level 2 spells. Today we are going to cover the weaker damaging choices of Phantasmal Force, Melf's Acid Arrow, and Shatter, as well as the door related spells of Arcane Lock and Knock. I have heard the criticism of the past few episodes and I've been more thoughtful about balance for these changes. Some of these changes are going to be strong. That's the point, but I don't believe anything here will fall into the broken tier in general play. If there do end up being some broken interactions or combos, well, thankfully I am not a designer at Larian, so these did not get implemented. Last note, these changes are not meant to be taken as the law. I'm hoping to provide some directional options that I think would make the spell more fun and more flavorful to use. If you have any ideas on how you would like to see these spells changed, whether they be completely different from these ideas or just tweaks, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Alright, let's get into it. First up, the damaging spells, Melf's Acid Arrow. I have two potential changes here, and these are not meant to be taken together, they are two separate changes. This spell is D tier in my opinion. Its damage is mediocre. It's not the worst in the game, but it is pretty severely outclassed by the other level 2 damaging spells. A simple, but not very exciting change would be to simply change the damage dice on the spell from D4s to D6s. At level 2, this would put it in line with Scorching Ray in terms of damage at 6d6. It doesn't quite have the same strong item interactions, and a third of the damage is delayed, but this is a simple change that would instantly make the spell usable for anyone who wants to. It's still outclassed, but what's important is that if someone wants to make an acid-focused wizard or some other kind of build using this, they have an option. For my other change, I have a more flavorful and potentially stronger choice. Melf's Acid Arrow has two gimmicks in my opinion. One is the acid, and two is the delayed damage. Let's play into those. The acid is nice but inconsequential. The spell currently makes a pool of acid that reduces AC by 2. Enemies will often walk out of this, and it can't affect your own party. Instead, let's directly apply the acid condition to the target, reducing their AC by 2 for the duration of the spell. Second gimmick, the delayed damage. As it currently works, the spell does 4d4 instantly and 2d4 at the end of the enemy's next turn. Upcasting increases both of these by 1d4. Now with this change, upcasting increases only the delayed damage by 1d4, but it makes the delayed damage proc an additional time. So at level 3, the spell would deal 4d4 on cast, then 3d4 at the end of the enemy's next turn, and then 3d4 at the end of their next turn. This is 2d4 more than it currently does at level 3, but it's only stronger after the third proc of damage. After the second proc, it only does 7d4, when currently it would have dealt 8d4. What this change would do numerically is make the damage much more comparable at higher levels to strong spells. Level 3 average damage would be behind Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Inflict Wounds, and other high damage spells, and it would be spread out over 3 damage procs, but numerically it's a lot less ugly. Level 4 damage would catapult towards the top of the damage charts, behind Moonbeam, but it would go cast for cast ahead of Scorching Ray and Inflict Wounds. Of course, we're comparing damage over many turns to usually just 1 or 2 procs, but the point stands. At high levels, the damage would be very high. This would still be a weak choice at level 2, it'd be fairly mediocre at level 3, but levels 4, 5, and 6, it would numerically outperform top spells. This spell is still flawed by backloading its damage, and that only gets more true, but it is a much more flavorful spell, it's a more unique spell, and it's something you could build around. You can make a tanky party and melt enemies away over many turns. Of note, Extended Spell might be a bit broken of an interaction with this, so if it was implemented, it might need to be incompatible with Extended Spell. Overall, I think this would be a fun, unique way to change the spell that would make it stronger and more unique, instead of just being outclassed. Next up, we have Phantasmal Force. This spell is F tier. It should never be cast. The concentration cost is high and the damage is laughable. My first change would make this spell miles more reliable. First, instead of ending on a successful save from enemies, they just don't take damage that turn. As it stands, once an enemy passes their save, the spell ends, and you probably dealt 1 to 3d6 damage over multiple turns. Now the condition will continue. Like Melf's Acid Arrow, this spell could deal a lot of damage in aggregate after many procs, but it's still going to be fairly weak. To actually make this spell an option you would feel great about casting, it should probably lose the concentration cost too. Still, if you're playing a party with tons of damage, it might not get cast much. But if you're playing a not super optimized party, this would suddenly become an exciting option against high health enemies like bosses. I do have a second option here that would take this in a completely different direction. In 5e, this spell is very different. It creates an illusion in the mind of the target that they treat as real, and that's the utility of it. The way I would bring this to Baldur's Gate 3 is by having it make enemies fearful. Your caster creates a terrifying image in the target's mind. This would make it very comparable to Dissonant Whispers, or the 5e spell Cause Fear. Dissonant Whispers deals more damage, has no concentration cost, but it only frightens enemies. Fearful is a significantly better condition, and the concentration cost and lower damage would make up for that. The duration of this spell should probably be shortened to account for the strong CC potential. I think either of these changes would be ways to make the spell stronger while staying faithful to either the Baldur's Gate 3 version with the top change or the 5e version with the bottom change. Next up is Shatter. I already think Shatter is decent. It's just too outclassed by other level 2 damaging options. My first proposal is a light buff by just increasing the AoE a bit. In my mind, the area of effect is the differentiator for Shatter. Sometimes you just want to deal okay damage to a lot of people. I have a mild AoE increase at base level, and upcasting adds to the AoE. I did not write out what it would look like because it's not consistent in metric versus imperial, but at level 3, it would be 17 feet or 4 meters. At level 5, it would be 20 feet or 5 meters. And if you're measuring in metric, it just goes up by 1 meter on each level. This is a way to both make the spell more unique and stronger without touching its damage. Its damage is already suboptimal at every level, and it would stay that way. But if you want to hit many enemies, here you go. You've got a choice. My other choice is playing into the fact that Shatter deals thunder damage. Thunder damage is pretty closely associated with proning enemies in Baldur's Gate 3. Destructive Wave knocks enemies prone, Reverberation knocks enemies prone. A simple and strong way to buff Shatter would be to make it knock enemies prone on a failed save. This would reduce their movement and give your attacks advantage for a turn. Prone is only really powerful when it can be chained on things like grease or ice, or it can be activated on enemies' turns, so I am confident this would not be overpowered. But it would make the spell instantly much stronger with a small change. No longer would it be an okay filler damage option, it would be a good filler damage option, and it would possibly pair well with things like grease and ice. That's it for the damage spells. Next up, I have Knock. Knock exists to open doors, and it's great at that, but lockpicking is free and fairly reliable, so the spell is only really cast to save time. I give it something in terms of combat utility. This one only has one change, and I'll admit it's not very exciting. Knock's 5e flavor is that it makes a very loud noise on cast. It sounds like thunder damage to me. I have added a very light damage and utility component to Knock based on this. Unleash a loud knocking sound that deals 2d8 thunder damage when cast directly on an enemy. Additionally, inflict 2 turns of reverberation on the target. As it's currently worded, enemies would still take full damage on a successful con save, but no reverb. This is in line with other spells. Heat Metal does not reduce damage on a save, and it also has 2d8 damage that can be recast, and Magic Missile is a stronger damage type with much higher damage. I think this would be a way to give Knock something in combat. It would be reliable, just like it is outside of combat. Lastly, we have Arcane Lock. This spell might secretly be strong, but it's just so niche to use. You really need to look for a scenario to cast it. For my first change, a simple buff would be to increase its range. This would make it easier to lure enemies through a door and then close it. Currently, you need to have your caster close to the door to lock it, so they really need to be near enemies. It would still be very niche, but if you want to use this spell, it's a bit easier now. My other change would give Arcane Lock a slight amount of damage. Close a door or container with a magical lock. It can no longer be lockpicked or opened with knock. Magically protect the target. When a creature damages the object, it takes 1d4 force damage in retaliation. I worded this specifically as damages instead of attacks, so that enemies don't just lose all their HP attacking unbreakable doors. But if you cast Arcane Lock on a standard wooden door, it'll now deal a few points of retaliation damage to the enemies knocking it down, which is nice and would encourage players to find uses. Alright, that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for watching, and let me know what you think. Did I screw the pooch and make some more OP options, or are these some actual balanced choices? How would you like to see these spells changed? And yeah, thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a good one.